I never used to go up into the attic. Not because it scared me. I'm not one of those guys who jumps at creaky floorboards or old boxes. It's just the attic always belonged to her. Carol kept it organized like a museum archive. Seasonal decorations, old photo albums, boxes labeled in her careful handwriting. That Sunday afternoon was quiet. Our daughter Kayla had gone back to college the night before, and Carol was at brunch with her book club, her girls, as she called them. So I was alone in the house with nothing but the hum of the fridge and the weight of a strange feeling I hadn't been able to shake for weeks. Maybe it was the way Carol had been more distant lately, or how she started wearing perfume on Thursdays for yoga night, though she never smelled like sweat when she got home. Maybe it was just the silence that creeps into a house after 20 years of marriage, when words are no longer necessary, but not in the comforting way. I went up into the attic looking for an old hiking bag. Figure I might take a weekend trip, clear my head. But instead, I found a box labeled, Dad's Letters, Private. It was shoved behind Christmas ornaments and an old box of baby clothes. I almost didn't open it. Almost. But I did. Inside were letters, not from her dad, not to her dad, but to her. Dozens of them. From a man named Nathan. At first I assumed it was an old flame, some high school boyfriend. But the dates were recent. Too recent. The top letter was postmarked just 3 weeks ago. I didn't even have to open it. My hands were shaking. My breath slowed. The gut feeling I'd been pushing down for months wrapped its hands around my throat. But I opened it anyway. See, I missed last Friday already. You always say I make you feel alive, but it's you who brings me back to life every time. The way you touched my hand across the bar, the way you looked at me when we said goodbye. It's getting harder to pretend. I know we said no complications, but I can't keep living in the shadows. Yours. Always. And I read it 3 times. Then I read the one beneath it. That one was worse. Carol hadn't just cheated. She had a life with this man. A world I wasn't part of. She kept every letter like a trophy. I sat on the attic floor for an hour. Just breathing. Not thinking. Not crying. Just breathing. When I finally got up, I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was focused. Because this wasn't just an affair. This was a woman who had buried the truth so deep, she thought it'd never surface. But it had. And now, I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to learn who Nathan was. That night, she came home like nothing happened. Kissed my cheek. Asked what I wanted for dinner. I smiled back and told her lasagna sounded good. I didn't sleep. I lay beside her, counting the rhythm of her breaths. I wondered if she'd texted him while brushing her teeth. I wondered if she was dreaming of him in the bed I bought. The next morning, she left early for a volunteer meeting. I stayed behind, and I got to work. First stop was my buddy Chris. He runs a small IT firm. He's not the guy you call for emails and printer issues. He's the guy you call when you want to dig into someone's digital skeletons. I need to find out who's been writing letters to my wife, I said. Chris didn't ask why. He knew me well enough. We'd served together years ago in the military. He'd seen me hold composure under pressure, and he knew when that calm quiet meant something had snapped beneath the surface. You got a last name? He asked. No, just a first name. Nathan, and a few dates from the letters. All right, he said, cracking his knuckles over the keyboard. Let's trace her email usage, social media logins, geotags, anything. You sure you want to go down this road? I'm already on it. 2 days later, I had a name, Nathan Holloway. He wasn't some nobody. He was a client, a real estate developer from Seattle who'd partnered with my wife's interior design firm on a boutique hotel project last year. Photos of them at events, smiling for the camera, showed up on local blogs. Carol had mentioned him once, in passing. Just another partner on a project. But now I saw it. The shoulder touches. The way his eyes followed her in the pictures. The easy familiarity of 2 people with secrets. He was divorced. No kids. Older than me by about 8 years. And wealthy. That explained the sudden wellness retreats Carol had taken lately. The expensive handbag she claimed she bought on sale. The champagne-colored scarf I found in her coat pocket that still had the tag from a boutique in Seattle. That weekend, I told Carol I was going on a fishing trip. She smiled, kissed me again like she meant it. I left at 5 a.m., but I didn't go fishing. I drove to Seattle. I watched Nathan's condo from my truck for hours. He lived in a luxury high-rise. Sleek, glass, sterile. The kind of place you live in when you don't plan on staying long. At 10:37 p.m., Carol arrived. I watched her take the elevator up without hesitation. She hadn't even changed her name in his phone. I knew this because I'd installed a GPS tracker in her car that morning and linked it to her phone's Bluetooth. When she reached the 27th floor, I snapped a photo of the building. I didn't plan to storm in. I just wanted to see, and I did. Through a gap in the curtains, I saw her silhouette lean into his. I saw the way she tilted her head up to kiss him. She didn't hesitate. Not a second. The drive back was silent. Rain tapping the windshield like a clock ticking down to something I didn't yet understand. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the man who didn't know. They say the worst part of betrayal is the silence that follows. But I'd argue it's the clarity. Because once I saw Carol with Nathan, it all began to make sense. The yoga nights, the untraceable business retreats, the sudden coldness when I talked about our future. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a life restructure. A life where I was the antique, kept around for appearances but no longer plugged in. I returned from Seattle without a word. Carol didn't ask much. She was too busy planning our anniversary dinner, some guilt-tinged performance she'd scheduled weeks prior. I played along, nodded, smiled, laughed when I had to. But inside, I was building a different kind of plan. See, I didn't want revenge in the way people talk about it on TV. I wasn't going to key his car or out her in front of our daughter. That was messy, small. No, what I wanted was clarity. I wanted proof, not just for me, but for Kayla, for the life I'd built. For the 23 years I'd spent believing in a version of a woman who, it turns out, had stopped believing in me long ago. It was an old photo that changed everything. I was flipping through albums, trying to keep my hands busy, pretending to look for pictures to frame for our anniversary party, when I found it. A black and white candid taken by a guest at a fundraising gala a year and a half ago. Carol was in the foreground, smiling, laughing, glass of wine in hand. And behind her, nearly out of frame, Nathan. His eyes weren't on the camera. They were locked on her. Focused. Familiar. Like he'd already undressed the evening in his head. It wasn't the kind of look strangers gave. It was the look of a man who already knew the way her smile curved when she lied. And then I saw it. Behind them, out of focus, head turned, frozen in a sip of champagne, was a woman I hadn't seen in over 15 years. Angela, my ex. The only person who'd ever come close to understanding the way my mind works. We'd broken up long before I met Carol. Back when I was still figuring out who I was. The last I'd heard, she'd moved to Vermont, got married, started a life far from the city and all its ghosts. But now she was here, at that event, on that night. And that meant one thing. She might have seen something, and she had no reason to lie to me. It took 3 days and one very uncomfortable phone call to her old best friend, but I found her. Angela now ran a small photography business in upstate New York. Family portraits, weddings, nonprofit events. Rob, she said, when I showed up at her studio unannounced. What the hell? I know. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. She looked good, grounded, the kind of woman who'd made peace with her past. Is this about Carol? She asked, sharp as ever. My silence was enough. Angela sighed and pulled out her phone. I didn't say anything back then because it wasn't my place. But I saw things that night. The way he touched her arm. The way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching. It was familiar. Way too familiar. You have pictures? She nodded slowly, unlocking her gallery. Always take background shots. Lighting tests. I still had them saved. She showed me a photo. Nathan's hand on Carol's lower back. Her leaning into him, smiling up like he was home. Another shot. Minutes later, Carol handing him a hotel key card beneath the dinner table, thinking no one saw. My breath left my lungs like a deflating balloon. There it was. Confirmation. Documented. Stamped. Frozen in time. You want me to send these to you? She asked. No, I said. I want you to hold on to them for now, just in case I need a witness. I returned home that night and found Carol in the kitchen, humming to herself while chopping basil like she hadn't shattered the foundation of our life. I was thinking we should do something fun for our anniversary, she said without looking up. A weekend in Charleston, maybe. Just the two of us. I stared at her hands. The same hands that passed a key to a man she'd called just a business contact. The same hands that used to hold mine when we walked down Cape Cod beaches like we had nothing to hide. Sure, I said. Charleston sounds great. Because now, it wasn't just about what she'd done. It was about how far she'd go to keep doing it. That night, I opened a hidden document folder on my laptop and began drafting a series of notes. Angela's testimony, the GPS records from Seattle, the letters from the attic, Carol's financials, joint account activity for past 6 months. Because I'd checked, she'd been funneling money into a separate account. Slowly, carefully, like a woman preparing for a life without her husband. A week later, Carol said she was going on another retreat. Where this time? I asked. North Carolina. Just a few days. Spa stuff. I nodded. Take the good luggage. And don't forget your new scarf. The one from Seattle. Her eyes froze, just for a second. Then she laughed. You're so observant. Always have been. I called Chris again. I need a track on her plane ticket. Passenger manifest. I need to know who else is staying at that resort. You think she's meeting him again? I know she is. And she did. Nathan's name appeared on the hotel registry under a corporate block for private wellness clients. He used a fake last name, a common trick for public figures and executives cheating in plain sight. Chris even pulled footage from Travelblog that had filmed B-roll of the resort for Instagram. There they were in the background, Carol and Nathan at a poolside table, laughing, holding hands. It was no longer about betrayal. It was about erasure. About a woman trying to delete the man who built a life with her, one flight at a time. So I started deleting her from mine. I transferred business shares to a separate trust, held under Kayla's name. I moved key assets out of reach, updated insurance policies, changed legal proxies. Because now I wasn't reacting, I was executing, and she had no idea. The day she returned, Carol looked radiant, sun-kissed, relaxed, floating on the energy of a woman who thought she was winning. How was the spa? I asked. She smiled. Healing. Really healing. I'm glad, I said, handing her a glass of wine. You deserve a break. Because she wouldn't be getting one for long. That night, while she slept, I opened a small safe hidden in my study and placed the printed photos Angela had mailed me inside. I added a flash drive of the GPS data. Then I made one final entry in my note file. Phase 2, exposure begins. They say your anniversary is a celebration. I say it's a test. This year, it was our 23rd. The kind of number people nod at politely. Wow, that's a long time. Without asking how many of those years were good. Ours? They were good. Until I realized most of the memories I cherished, she had simply been performing in. Carol had gone all out. Reservations at a rooftop restaurant. A new black dress that I hadn't seen before. Diamond earrings, she claimed, were a little gift to herself. Kayla sent flowers from college. We snapped a photo for her, Carol leaning her head on my shoulder like she was still the woman I met 2 decades ago in a bookstore, telling me she loved poetry when all she wanted was quiet. That night, on that rooftop, Carol toasted to 23 more. And I said nothing. I just raised my glass and smiled, because my toast was coming. A week earlier, I had contacted an attorney, one she didn't know about. Holstein, discreet, direct, the kind of man who didn't flinch when I said, I need to protect myself from my wife. Quietly, efficiently, legally. He nodded once and got to work. Together, we began structuring a quiet separation of assets. Not a divorce. Not yet. Something more subtle. We moved the lake cabin to my trust. Shifted the business from joint ownership to sole operation under a technical restructuring clause. Carol never saw the email because she never checked the email tied to that contract. She assumed I handled the paperwork. She was right, just not in the way she thought. Back to the rooftop. Back to that final toast. As Carol dipped her fork into a chocolate souffle, I leaned across the table. There's something I want to show you. She looked up amused. You didn't give me a gift, did you? In a way, I did. I handed her a small black envelope. Inside was a photograph. Nathan, Carol, holding hands by a pool in North Carolina. Dated. Time stamped. watermarked by a travel blog that had unknowingly exposed their secret. Carol stared at it, blinking once, twice. Then she laughed. Are you kidding? That could be anyone. I handed her the next one, closer, clearer. Her face, his hand, the scarf, the matching watch I bought her last Christmas. Then the next photo, then the one after that. No words, just still from a life she swore didn't exist. The laugh disappeared. I know, Carol. Her eyes darted around the rooftop like she was trying to find an exit, a back door out of a reality she hadn't planned for. I kept my voice calm, even, like I was reading a bedtime story. I know about the letters, about the money transfers, about Nathan's little corporate block bookings. I know you've been building a life without me. You've been spying on me. You've been erasing me. Big difference. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No script. No lies prepared for this scene, because she thought I'd never get this far. It was a mistake, she stammered. A phase. I didn't mean to. You meant it. Every weekend. Every lie. Every key card passed under the table. I stood up, placed a manila envelope beside her dessert. These are copies. I've already filed the originals with my attorney, and with a neutral mediator. This isn't a threat, Carol. This is your freedom. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Maybe the first in years. Rob, I don't want a divorce. You already filed for one in spirit. I'm just doing the paperwork you forgot to finish. The next morning, she didn't come home. She didn't call either. But I didn't expect her to. I made coffee, sat on the porch, read the paper, like a man who had finally stepped out of a house that was burning behind him. 2 days later, she showed up. Hair a mess. No makeup, sweatpants, and tear-streaked cheeks. A version of Carol I hadn't seen in years. Please, she whispered at the front door. Just talk to me. I'll let her in. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed her to understand what she destroyed. She sat on the couch, gripping a mug of tea like it was the last thing keeping her hand from shaking. I didn't mean to fall for him, she said. It was stupid. Lonely. You were always working. Don't. I held up a hand. This isn't about me being gone. This is about you never showing up. Not for years. I was scared. Of what? Of being invisible. Of getting older. Of fading. I studied her face. The cracks beneath the makeup. The woman I'd once believed in, now hollowed by choices she couldn't take back. And in that moment, I didn't feel hate. I felt sadness. Because the truth was, we both faded. I just never imagined she'd look for color in someone else's arms. I didn't throw her out. I didn't scream. I didn't demand anything. Instead, I handed her a second envelope. My terms, I said. No drama. No court. You leave clean. No financial claim. You walk away. That's your only dignity left now. She nodded, eyes brimming. And I said the one thing I hadn't yet. You broke something in me, Carol. But you didn't kill it. I'll heal. I'll move on. But not with you. She left without another word. Kayla came home the next weekend. I told her everything. The real version. The clean version. No insults. No shouting. Just the truth. She cried. Then she hugged me. Then she said something I'll never forget. You didn't deserve this. But you handled it better than anyone else would have. And maybe that was enough. Because I didn't want to be the man who exploded. I wanted to be the man who outlasted the fire. After Carol left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. But even as I tried to settle into the quiet, something in my gut wouldn't let me rest. Because I knew Carol didn't build this alone. She was clever, yes, but she was never strategic. Not the way this whole deception had been structured. No, someone had helped her, guided her. Nathan Holloway, the man behind the curtain. I called Chris. Pull everything, I said. Bank records, properties, business holdings, LLCs, whatever he's hiding, I want it exposed. Chris didn't ask why. He just out of work. 3 days later, I had a report thick enough to bind. Nathan Holloway wasn't just a man Carol had an affair with. He was a collector of other people's lives. Married twice. Divorced twice. No children. Each ex-wife left with nothing but whispered rumors about infidelity and misplaced funds. He ran a string of boutique property developments, clean on paper, but financed through layers of shell companies tied to investors with a history of tax evasion and lawsuits. And the worst part? He was already preparing for another exit. One of his holding companies had recently purchased a property in Belize, a beachfront house under the name NH Services International. Carol's name was nowhere on it, but her signature had been used to authorize renovations. Forged. She didn't even know. So while she sat in her sister's guest house licking her wounds, the man she left me for was preparing a new escape hatch, probably for a younger version of her. And that's what made me act. I wasn't trying to save Carol. I wasn't even trying to punish Nathan. I just couldn't let him win. Not after everything. Because it wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about watching someone dismantle a life I built with blood, sweat, and time, and walking away clean. I made one call. Ray Kowalski, private investigator, ex-Boston PD, the kind of guy who didn't blink when things got murky. I want everything you can legally and quietly get on Nathan Holloway. I want to know who he's hurt, where the bodies are buried. I want leverage. Understood, Ray said. Give me a week. He called back in 4 days. You're going to want to sit down. Turns out, Nathan had a pattern. A documented one. 3 former employees had filed complaints against him. 2 lawsuits buried in settlements. 1 whistleblower who mysteriously dropped his claim after a trip to the ER. And most importantly, he'd been investigated by the IRS 5 years ago. Why wasn't he arrested? Because he made a deal, Ray said. But that deal has an expiration date. And one bad move, one paper trail leading to fraud, and he's toast. You think Carol knows? Nope. And from the way this guy moves, she's just the latest stepping stone. That night, I did something I didn't expect. I called her. Carol sounded tired. Raw. Cautious. I'm not calling to yell, I said. I just need to show you something. Tomorrow. Noon. Public place. She hesitated. Why? Because the man you think is your future is planning his next escape. And it doesn't include you. We met at a cafe near the water. Neutral territory. Carol looked thinner. Worn down. Like the lies had begun to eat her from the inside out. I slid a folder across the table. What is this? Everything Nathan's been hiding. The Belize property. The lawsuits. The shell companies. The signatures he forged. Yours among them. She flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling. I don't believe this, she whispered. You don't want to, but you know it's true. She closed the folder slowly. Why are you doing this? Because I may not love you anymore, but I still won't let someone bury you while you're standing. I left her there. No drama. No croce. Just the truth. She didn't call after that. Didn't text. But 3 days later, I heard through mutual friends that Carol had canceled her credit cards, pulled her savings, and vanished from Nathan's radar entirely. And that's when Ray gave me the final piece. Nathan had already filed paperwork to transfer assets to Belize, using Carol's credentials. Falsified. I forwarded the documents anonymously to the IRS contact Ray had dug up. Let them untangle it. I didn't need Nathan arrested. I just needed him exposed. And when he showed up on the news 2 weeks later, under federal investigation, disgraced and bankrupt, I smiled for the first time in a long while. My house was quiet again, but this time it was mine. No sados. No secrets in the attic. No letters laced with lies. You don't realize how much noise betrayal makes until it's gone. When the chaos ends, when the house finally stops echoing with what-ifs and where did it goes, all that's left is you. Just you. And whatever version of yourself survived the storm. I had survived, but I wasn't the same. Nathan Holloway's fall made headlines. Developer linked to fraud scandal under federal scrutiny. His smiling face on the screen, neck deep in legal hell, was the punctuation mark I didn't know I needed. Carol never showed up to defend him. She didn't cry, didn't tweet some vague apology, didn't run to his side like you might expect from someone who'd risked a marriage for him. She disappeared. Quietly. Respectfully. And for once, she stayed gone. Kayla came home that weekend. She looked different too. Older, somehow. Not physically, just deeper. Like watching your parents fall apart changes how you carry yourself. We sat on the porch sipping coffee, looking out at the yard we used to rake together when she was a little girl. Do you hate her? She asked softly. I didn't answer right away. No, I finally said. but I don't miss her either. Kayla nodded slowly. That's fair. She reached in her coat pocket and pulled out something folded. A letter. Handwritten. Carol's handwriting. She mailed this to me last week. I didn't open it. I looked at the envelope for a long time. It wasn't addressed to me. Do you want me to read it? She asked. I shook my head. No. If she needed to tell you something, that's yours. Not mine. But later that night, curiosity got the better of me. Kayla left it on the kitchen counter, and I stood there under the soft light, staring at it for a long time before walking away. Because I didn't need it. Not anymore. A week passed. Then two. My days grew fuller. Small projects around the house, meeting old friends for lunch, updating things that had been neglected while I was busy playing husband to a woman who wasn't really there. I wasn't trying to rebuild the past. I was starting over. But life has a funny way of giving you something right when you're not looking for it. It was at the hardware store. I was buying paint samples. Figured the living room could use a new coat, something brighter. That's when I saw her. Angela, the woman who'd helped me connect the dots. My ex before Carol. The one who saw the truth that night in the photograph and never once tried to use it for leverage. She was standing by a rack of ceiling lights, squinting at her phone. I almost didn't say anything, but she looked up and smiled. Well, well, she said. You're a hard man to forget. So are you, I replied. We got coffee. Just as friends, we said. But it didn't feel like friendship. It felt like something quietly restarting. Like a page that had been waiting years to be turned. We talked about her photography, my business, life after hurt. You look lighter, she said at one point. I feel it, I admitted. Like I finally took off a coat I didn't know I was wearing. Angela leaned in, voice gentle. She broke you, Rob, but she didn't finish you. I smiled, because she was right. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like a man trying to survive a broken marriage. I felt like a man who had outlived it. Later that night, I went back to the attic. I opened the box of letters. One by one, I lit each envelope and dropped it into the metal fire bin I kept near the tools. Watched them curl into black lace. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was closure. As the last letter burned, I whispered the only thing left to say. Goodbye. Redemption doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it walks in unnoticed. Soft steps. No announcement. Just a new morning where the weight on your chest isn't there anymore. Where the silence finally feels like peace, not punishment. I didn't go looking for healing. I just made room for it. It showed up in little things. Like repainting the living room walls and not thinking about whether Carol would have liked the color. Like waking up on a Sunday and not hearing the ticking of her absence in the kitchen. Like running into old friends and not having to lie about how things were good. No more pretending. Just truth. And that truth, as painful as it had been, set me free. I never expected Angela to become more than just a voice from the past. But life has a way of planting old seeds in new soil. We started seeing each other regularly. No big declarations. Just steady, real connection. Her laugh wasn't wrapped in performance. Her questions weren't tests. And when she looked at me, she didn't see a man who'd lost. She saw a man who chose to survive. One evening, we sat on my back porch, watching the light fade behind the trees. I used to think redemption was a second chance, I said. Angela tilted her head. And now I think it's a first chance to live without fear. She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself lean into someone without wondering when they'd leave. A month later, Carol reached out. An email. Short. Direct. Nothing emotional. I'm sorry. For everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. I've started therapy. I've gone back to work. And I'm letting go of the version of myself that let all of this happen. You didn't deserve what I did. But I'm grateful you didn't let it destroy you. I read it once. Then again. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just peace. She had done what she did. She had chosen another path. But I had walked away from the fire without becoming the ashes. The news said Nathan Holloway had taken a plea deal. No jail time. Just a lifetime of professional ruin. Fitting. A man who built nothing but illusions finally had nothing left to hide behind. And Carol? She moved back to her hometown. Started teaching part-time. For what I heard, she lived quietly. Honestly, alone. And that was probably the best ending she could have asked for. Kayla graduated top of her class that spring. At the ceremony, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thanks for teaching me what strength really looks like." And maybe that was it. Maybe that was my redemption. Not the revenge, not the letters burned or the scandals exposed, but the quiet pride in my daughter's eyes, the steadiness in my hands, the knowledge that I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. Later that night, Angela and I walked the quiet trail behind the house. The stars came out one by one, like tiny reminders that even in darkness, light always returns. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it. No fear, no boasts, just now. Because in the end, I wasn't the man who got cheated on. I was the man who uncovered the lie, stood in the storm, and came out with my soul intact. Redemption didn't roar. It whispered, and I finally listened.